buy the ticket, take the ride. Sometimes you do have to risk a little bit.
Hey everyone, I'm Chase, the founder of Oak & Oscar. I've always loved the stories of watches and the people behind them and why they collect them. We've got Rob, also known as Bazamu on Instagram, here with his personal collection to tell us a little bit about the stories behind the watches. He's got a collection that he's built through barn finds, old school hunting, and I really can't wait for you to learn more about both him and his watches. So, Rob, why do you love watches?
I don't know. I think that they're specifically vintage. They're, a tangible connection to decades prior, lives prior. We attach these histories to the watches that aren't necessarily groundbreaking histories. It's not like Teddy Roosevelt wore one of these watches, but you live that person's life and you continue their legacy in a small way just by putting it on your wrist, and it kind of transports you to another time.
What was your very first, the piece that started this all?
Yeah, so I bought my first watch from a dealer. It was not a great example. It was a Tudor Submariner, but that said, it captivated me. And a few months later, I went to Europe with my wife, and on the last day, we were wandering down this alley in Copenhagen, saw this shop that just said quality vintage. So like any watch nerd, you see the vintage sign, right? And
automatically you're interested.
You're like, look, it's going to take 30 seconds. I might as well. I owe it to myself to go look. And so in the window, then there was this, an Ed White Speedmaster. Mm-hmm. At the time, I didn't even know anything about straight lugs. I had not made a huge purchase yet in the watch world. I was still dipping my feet in, and so I wanted a Speedmaster, but I wanted a late 70s, very common 145022 to just kind of like get used to it, right?
Yeah, a simple one to digest.
Exactly. So anyway, we walked in, saw it, tried it on. The guy just opened his store. Says, "Do you know anything about the Ed White Speedmaster?" And I'm like, yeah. You just kind of feign knowledge so that it looks like you know what you're talking about. And he says, then you know that they're really rare, practically shaking at this point, because I've never had a find like this in the real world. We were leaving that night and the banks were closed. So I said, look, let me get your card. I'll be home in 2 days. I'll reach out to you as soon as I'm back. So that 48-hour period, I did nothing but read about the Speedmaster. It was a total crash course. And where it came out was that I ultimately felt comfortable buying the watch. After customs delays, 2 weeks later, it got to me. And this is without a doubt the most important watch in my collection, because it ignited this spark that now leads me to sit on eBay at 3 in the morning
so it's
if
also
I happen to be up.
It's also maybe the downfall.
Oh, yeah. My bank account absolutely hates this watch.
But I actually totally agree with you on that. And as something that, as a collector, before even Oak & Oscar existed, one thing that I loved to do was when I traveled, I'd love to find a watch that was made, owned, or designed in whatever country I was in.
Yep.
And that was something that was tremendously fun. And some of the watches that I picked up were old 1940s Najar from Turkey, right? Like nothing terribly expensive. It was maybe 100 euros.
Yep.
But when I see it, when I wear it, I'm immediately brought back to the random people from antique shops who helped me find a watch store and help translate for me.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where the story behind the watch itself can bring you back. And,
absolutely.
And I love that. And I think that's really cool. How have watches affected your life?
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of those things where it starts on an online forum,
right?
And you're just looking at avatars, right? So you get to know a few people through that. Maybe you get a couple. In our case, it was the Nomos.
Yep.
And you find out someone else has it, and the great thing about watches is, as collectors, there's not a lot of pretense. If somebody has a watch and it seems like their taste is pretty similar, I already know there's a good chance that we're going to get along.
Yep.
And so it's really easy to say, hey, I'd love to sit down, grab a beer, grab a coffee, and talk about watches, see your Nomos or something like that.
Yeah.
The friendships that you're able to develop through this hobby, something that I never thought I would have had this quickly. And it's just such a supportive community too. So
yeah, and that brings us to actually a good conversation about how we met.
Yep.
And I think it was actually through Instagram. I think I searched tags and I found you.
Probably,
and I messaged you and I said, hey, you've got the Nomos World Timer. You wear it on a nice brown suede strap. Can I come and see it?
Yeah.
And I think the next day we met up at a coffee shop.
Yeah, I got coffee.
Yeah.
That was my first watch meeting ever.
Yeah,
right?
it was like pretty much within a couple of weeks, I ended up finding a Nomos.
Yep.
I bought mine used and put it immediately on a brown suede strap, and it's such a phenomenal watch. I absolutely love that watch.
Yep.
I actually bought that watch to celebrate the success of the Burnham. That is how much of a watch nerd that I am. I bought a different watch to celebrate my own watch. So let's move on and talk about the little Hoyer you got there.
I think personally the Carrera is the most beautiful sports watch ever created.
Yeah, and this one was one of the original ones designed by Jack himself.
Yep.
And it's essentially what some people say is the most perfect proportion, classically designed chrono.
Yep. It's proof that 36 millimeters is more than enough if done correctly. And the balance, the symmetry of the dial, the lugs are my favorite that I've ever worn. It's just truly a perfect watch. And this one is very special. This is a 2447 NT, which is black dial, tachymeter scale on the outside. There's less than 10 of these out there in the world. This is, to me, one of the rarest forms of the greatest watch that I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and so this is definitely one of the most special watches that I have.
What do you look for in a watch?
It's all about the dial for me. One of the things that I've took down as a mantra in the very beginning: condition, condition, condition.
Sure. But when you talk about condition, immediately one of the first watches that comes to mind with your collection is your Nina.
Yeah.
Because that one is you've got amazing pieces, but this one I think is a super special collector's grade.
Yeah.
Just the story behind it. Again, the idea of how you even got it on your wrist.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal story.
Part of it is kind of the aspect of, buy the ticket, take the ride. Sometimes you do have to risk a little bit. So I get this random email one day from a guy that says, "Hey, I saw your article. I have a Nina Rint UG. Do you want to buy it?" I don't throw grail around lightly. This was truly a grail. Yeah. As soon as I saw that Hodinkee article, I was like, this to me is a damn near perfect watch.
For sure.
Met him in a police station with his wife, and it was incredible to just sit there and talk with him for 10 minutes. That's all it was. But you get to you see the sense of relief on his face that it went well, and that he's able to recognize this fantastic profit for this thing that had been sitting there. But also the relief in knowing that he could sense that I was somebody who was going to really cherish this.
Another piece that's always intrigued me, and it's kind of new to your collection.
Yeah.
I think the story behind how it may even be a precursor to a very celebrated watch, a watch that right now is very big in the news with a tribute piece, is the Rodania.
That's just a great story about the collector community. I was on one of the forums. The story is that they were made starting in 1954. So the 2915 Speedmaster was introduced in 1957. The connection to the 2915 Speedmaster is undeniable. Yeah. If you put an external bezel on it, it's a dead ringer minus a couple slight tweaks for the 2915. This predated and essentially laid a blueprint for what has gone on to become one of the most symbolic rare watches ever. It all comes together in a story that makes sense. It's such a radical design for the mid-50s. You just do not see sports watches from 1954 that looked like this.
So let's also talk about this Rolex. I know you only have a couple of them, and they've really just been added to your collection in the past year or so. But tell me more about the Daytona.
You can only hear the Daytona name and see the pictures of it for so long without giving in. And the thing that eventually led me to do that was my wife was pregnant. I broke my somewhat firm rule of not buying every watch from a dealer. It's one of those things that is really special to me, because this will be baby Baz's watch one day, as long as he is not a little shithead. So
no, I get it, and I actually bought a watch for my son for
Speedmaster, right?
Yeah, it's a Speedmaster, the sapphire, sapphire sandwich, with the intention that I wanted him to be able to see all the gears in the back. I wanted him to, find that love for the mechanics of it. And it's such a fun idea to know that you can wear this watch and one day that they'll see photos of it and they'll get it. So do your friends know about your watch addiction?
Some of them do, and
they make fun of you a little
bit. Oh yeah. Well, they used to make fun of me. Well, what's been amazing to me is in the past 4 years, and as I've gone deeper and obviously my presence in social media has become a little higher, all of a sudden those normal friends are saying, hey, don't tell anybody else, but I want to get a watch. Like what's a good watch for me to start with? And it's amazing. There's probably 5 or 6 friends that have done that to me in the past couple of years.
So tell me a little bit more about the watch that's on your wrist right now.
This is one of your creations. I remember that you had texted me and you said, hey, you want to get coffee today? I'm down in the Loop. I said, absolutely. You said, I'm also bringing a prototype for the new watch, and I'd really love to get your feedback and see what you think about it. It hit all of the right notes for me. The size was perfect. Anything more than 40 doesn't really work for me, but this solved the size dilemma. I loved, as you can see, I love, accents and colors. This had that awesome contrast of the gray dial as well as the orange accents around it. And then I'd never had a GMT, so I didn't realize how nice that is. And then I think the last part is, it was kind of a link where, I could participate in you doing what I, in many ways, envied and wanted to do.
That's cool. I really appreciate that. I think with that, I say cheers and thank you for coming to the watch table.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great.